With everything going on, do you ever feel anxious, out of control, or powerless? We're living in unprecedented times, and the pace of change is only escalating. Given all of this, mindful leadership can feel a little soft or disengaged. It's actually the opposite. Today, I want to talk about how we can practice mindful leadership to navigate this uncertainty and be more engaged and better engaged and more effective. When I'm coaching leaders and teams, one of the things that often comes up is just the vast amount of uncertainty they're navigating about what is happening now and what is ahead. This might be in the news, it might be in their industry, it might be in their people. There's just so much uncertainty. The pace of change is escalating. It's not sort of a bump now and we'll go back down. It's not a linear line. It's a escalating curve. With the shifts in AI, which are constantly changing and improving, climate change and the impacts of that escalating, governmental unpredictability, what's happening in our local and immediate communities, the challenges we're facing. And many of us are navigating potential leadership changes and transitions and succession in our organizations and maybe even in our lives. We have this acronym that is floating around called VUCA, which stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And that level of VUCA seems to be also escalating. One of the things I'm often telling the leaders that I'm working with is that if you're waiting for the hurricane to pass and bring you calm, peace, and happiness, you're in real trouble. I often use stronger language. And real leaders, mindful leadership, allows those leaders to be at the calm at the center of the hurricane while all of this chaos circles around them. It doesn't mean we pretend there's not a hurricane, but how do we be grounded and centered at the calm of this, observing what is happening, engaging with it in the right way? If you can find ways to bring that calm, peace, and happiness in spite of the external circumstances, but find that within you, it can really transform how you lead, how you show up, and how you live. Mindful leadership is not about being disengaged from the world. It's about being more and better engaged from a place of centeredness and groundedness. We can think about mindful leadership as this very simple concept of just being present in this moment. And now in this moment. And now in this moment. And if that sounds simple, try it. Try to be present in this moment without worrying about your next meeting, without worrying about that conflict you had with a person in your life yesterday, without anticipating what you should be doing, what would be a better use of your time, what might be more productive. Just try being in this moment. Mindful leadership has us living in the present and not the past or the future. And the past is easy to fall into because it's our memories, it's the mistakes, it's the nostalgia, it's the things we've had that we long for, the moments that we regret. We wake up at 3:30 in the morning thinking about that dumb thing we once said in a meeting. And the future is tempting because we want to anticipate, we want to plan, we worry about all the possibilities, and we want to have a plan to navigate that, which is really a way of trying to be in control of other people, other things, our circumstances. Mindful leadership is about being with what is, not what we wish was, and not arguing with reality. It helps us be more effective, consistent, and sustainable as leaders. So today I want to share 4 practices that I often share with my coaching clients and the leadership teams that I'm working with. Here are 4 practices for mindful leadership. The first practice here is to stop arguing with reality. And I don't know any of us who think we argue with reality until we unpack it a little bit, and then just about all of us are doing that. I live in Minnesota, where the weather is a big organizer of our lives. Today it happens to be 3 degrees out right now. I'm sick of the cold. I'm ready to move on. I love winter, but I'm ready for the next thing. But arguing with how cold it is doesn't change that reality. Arguing that it shouldn't be raining on a particular day doesn't change that reality. How do we be aware of what the weather is and make choices and decisions based on that? Now, that really makes sense, and I think we all know people who argue about the reality of the weather, and it doesn't really work out well for them. And I think the weather is a useful teacher here because although it might seem silly to argue with the weather, many of us do it, but many of us are arguing with the reality of our boss and that idiosyncratic thing she does. Some of us argue with the reality of a problem we're facing. This shouldn't be, or in this day and age, or how can this still be happening, or why do I have to deal with this? That's arguing with the reality of a problem, or the news, or a partner, or child. I love this teaching from psychologist and mindfulness teacher Tara Brach. She calls radical acceptance. And the twin wings of radical acceptance are mindfulness and compassion. And mindfulness is what we're talking about, which is just being present with what is happening, not what we wish or what was moral or what was good, but what is happening. And arguing with the reality of what is actually a way of staying disengaged. It might sound really smart or critical or thoughtful to say, I can't believe this is still happening in this day and age. But as long as you're in disbelief or arguing with that reality, you can't really engage with the challenge before you. The first step to engaging is we have to be aware of what really is happening, as much as we may not like it or wish it wasn't so. The second part is compassion, which is engaging with that. Maybe self-compassion, compassion with others, compassion with the world, compassion with the situation. Arguing with reality can be a way we stay disengaged. And the first step to mindful leadership is, what is happening now? What is my reality? And from there, we can begin to think, how do we want to engage with it? The second practice here for mindful leadership is separating control from agency. And this might be one of the biggest learnings of my life so far. The way I often say it is life gets magical if you can give up as much control as possible over what is beyond you, and at the same time claim as much agency as possible over what is within you. I'll say that again. How can we give up as much control as possible over what is beyond us? And how do we claim as much agency as possible over what is within us? And so controlling things that are beyond us are other people, the weather, the circumstances, the news, problems, challenges, anything outside of you. And you don't have any control over that. And so how do we let go of that? That's really a difficult thing to do. And at the same time, claim as much agency as possible over what is within us. For what I think, what do I consume, both food as well as information. What do I read? What am I consuming? We often think when we're stuck that there's only one way of viewing things. And when we're unstuck, we can see many different ways of seeing that from many different perspectives. I always think about this in terms of flying. When I fly on an airplane, there's so many things that are beyond my control. The time the plane takes off, the comfort of the seat, the temperature, what the person next to me is doing and crowding me, or what they're watching, or all these things that can be really frustrating and can consume my energy. But that's not mindfulness. Mindfulness is recognizing these things that are happening and then thinking, how do I want to engage with myself? Do I want to sleep? Do I want to listen to a book? Do I want to think and take notes? Do I want to just sit in quiet? Do I want to talk to the person next to me, or do I want to do anything to avoid that, which is usually the case? So flying is often an example of so many things going on me that are tangible, real, and affect my life. And if I focus there, I can be really upset. And I fly a lot, and I see a lot of people who are furious with the reality that they have no control over. And if we focus on what we can do, our thoughts, our choices, our decisions, we have more agency. The third practice I want to offer here is around healthy non-attachment. Now, healthy non-attachment is a term from psychology, not from Buddhist or other spiritual practices. And it simply means, how do we be attached but not overly attached. So healthy non-attachment is a way of saying what's the right measure here. Buddhists would call this the middle path, not caring too much but also not caring at all. One of the things I often provoke leaders with is this notion that I think most of you would be better at your job if you didn't care so much. Maybe that resonates with you, maybe it doesn't. But I think most of you would be better at your job if you didn't care so much. Now, this is middle path is important. I'm not saying don't care at all, but most leaders I encounter, that's not really a risk for them. But don't care too much. And for most leaders I know, they are overly involved in the problems and the people and the day-to-day. They're caring too much, and it feels like the right thing to do. It feels dedicated and committed in what we demand of leaders, but it actually is an obstacle to perspective, to good thinking, to being present, to letting go. And so healthy non-attachment is finding that right balance of what's the right amount of caring and what's the right amount of letting go in that situation. And the last one I want to share today is the mindful leadership practice of humor. I love this line from mindfulness teacher Jon Kabat-Zinn, who said, "This is too serious a problem for us to take too seriously." I've heard him say that twice. The first was on a podcast when someone asked him about social media and the implications for loneliness, and we feel lonely and we seek connection, so we turn to social media, we find comparison, and then we feel more lonely in this sort of endless loop that we can get into. So he was talking about this challenge of social media in our time being too serious a matter for us to take too seriously. Then I heard him talk about it in terms of the challenges of global terrorism. That global terrorism is too serious a matter for us to take too seriously. And what he's pointing out is that humor can be a pathway to perspective, to new thinking, to innovation, to creativity, to new angles on the problem, to new solutions and possibilities. And so how can humor be a mindful leadership strategy that you employ? I'm going to put links that includes reference to all of this and so much more in the description. There's a lot more that I want to unpack around mindful leadership, but these are just 4 strategies that I wanted to help get you started with. Sharing these 4 strategies is quite easy. Doing them is hard. If you could master these 4 things, and I certainly don't have them mastered, I work on them. This is why I call them practices. But if you could master just these 4 things that I shared with you today, you'd be well on your way to spiritual master and enlightenment. So if it's hard, if you need a lot of practice, be gentle with yourself. I would encourage you to practice these, work on them. Nothing that you're ever going to perfect, but how can you practice that? And see if they help you feel like you're at the calm eye at the center of the hurricane. While the events of the people and your organization and the world swirl around you, can you be the calm eye at the center of the hurricane, grounded and centered, making choices about when, where, and how you can best engage? I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Share how you're practicing mindful leadership. And yes, I will read them all. Or skip the comments and just be present in this moment. And now in this one. Keep going. Just like that. You're doing it just right.